It is said that in space no one can hear you scream. That is probably for the best, for when the conclusion to the epic near masterpiece Mass Effect landed, the dissenting voices of bitter fans would have forever reverberated throughout the universe. All have joking aside, we are here today to discuss the impact of the beloved Mass Effect Trilogy. Yes, trilogy. We are not including its sequel Mass Effect Andromeda, except to acknowledge its existence. This really has less to do with the way it was received, but more that its place in the Mass Effect universe has little bearing on the original trilogy. So, if you are a fan of Andromeda, I am sorry. For Frank, Geno, Mike, and I, Mass Effect had a profound impact on our thoughts of what a video game is capable of. However, that realization did not come immediately. It didn't come after completing the first game or even the second. No, it took the entire culmination of the trilogy for us to realize what we had just experienced. You see, Mass Effect is a true trilogy. You can play each game individually and appreciate its story, gameplay mechanics, music, but the entire narrative takes place over all three games. You only get the full story if you play the full story. Much like The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien may have written 3 separate books, but a singular narrative encompasses all 3. So sit back, relax, and listen to us deliberate on what we love, what we condemn, and what makes us return again and again to the Mass Effect trilogy. We are discussing Mass Effect tonight, and I have with me 3 fine young gentlemen. We'll start with the gentleman with the arcades behind him, if you'll please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Geno.
And then the gentleman to his right on my screen with the giant robotic penis in front of him.
Hey, what's up? I'm Frank.
And below him, using the cloud motif, we have...
What's up? I'm Mike. And I don't have a camera. Apologies.
Our good friend Mike here this is his first time joining us on this podcast, and he is a big lover of Mass Effect with these other 2 gents with me, and that's why we've invited him on tonight. Thank you for joining us today, Mike.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
All right, so as I mentioned before, we will be covering Mass Effect. This is going to be a bigger podcast question-wise than we've had in the past. Usually we try to limit it to 5, but this time we have 8 solid questions we're going to be going through. And Mass Effect is a really big part of our love of gaming. It really has impacted the way we expect our games to be ever since we've played through it. But for these 3 gentlemen in particular, they have really immersed themselves into that universe. And so they will be taking over and responding to these questions. I am just going to manage the conversation as we go through this. So starting with question number 1, and I'm going to target our favorite arcade enthusiast, Geno. How has Mass Effect changed your idea of what a video game can be?
I don't know. I don't know that. I guess I couldn't say it like that. It has currently. I think when it first came out, definitely it. I just remember. It was like around Christmas time that I finally got to play it, and I was so into it that I think I missed every single celebration that you typically have around Christmas, and I think I lied my way out of a number of those things just to play it. So I would say, like, if you're doing that, you must be doing something that is, you haven't done before. So yeah, I would say it absolutely changed what I thought video games could be. Yeah, sure.
Well, I guess the question is, though, how did you perceive video games before? And then when you played Mass Effect, how did it change your concept of what a video game could do?
Well, I think I actually don't credit Mass Effect with doing that. I think actually before it, the Knights of the Old Republic, I think that was the first time that I said, this is game-changing, because they had the same sort of dialogue trees and kind of like this really, they had that scale of light and dark, and, your choices matter. So I I think that's where it started. But I think Mass Effect actually it was like I would say that's the template, and then Mass Effect expanded on that template to kind of like the nth degree. So yeah, I would say it's the great follow up to Knights of the Old Republic. So and it just kind of blew it wide open.
So as opposed to the game itself being the change, it's the game that improved on the initial change that came.
Right,
before.
I think so. Yeah.
So you think it mastered that gameplay?
Yeah.
And both games are done by BioWare.
Right. Well, and then later on, BioWare had done Jade Empire for Xbox, and Jade Empire gets a lot of attention for those choice trees as well as the choosing sides and things like that.
Yeah.
Also, Dragon Age, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah,
right.
Dragon Age had that too.
Which came later, right? So, yeah, obviously they've been playing with this concept for a long time. But yeah, that's true. Knights of the Old Republic, I hadn't thought about that. It's probably one of the earliest games I can think of that introduced that in a way that made it compelling.
And I think I just remember that. I mean, not to take away from Mass Effect, because Mass Effect had a number of moments where I was like, my God, I can't believe I'm playing this. But Knights of the Republic, I remember a moment where it was really early on, and I think it's one of the first kind of major dialogues you have with the character, and it's been so long I don't remember. But I kind of sat there kind of dumbfounded in front of my screen like, oh my gosh, I can choose how I'm going to have this conversation, and I don't know what it's going to do to the world. Like I had to like stop and just kind of sit there for a minute and kind of take it in. So it was very cool.
Nice. Thank you, Geno. How about you, Frank?
You know what? I think Mass Effect was the first time that I felt overwhelmed by a video game, because I played RPGs before that, and RPGs are really big, but I never felt just I'm trying to think of a good another word for overwhelmed. I think
intimidated.
Yes, intimidated would be a good one actually, because you start off first mission, they have the whole intro cutscene and everything. You fight through Eden Prime, and then when you get to the Citadel, and all the politics are happening, and the stories, it's doing the setup, and I was just like, there's so much to do. There's so much information that I'm running around, and it didn't feel like a typical RPG to me. Granted it is an action RPG, but it's got a lot of those heavy RPG elements in the first game, and it was just so daunting. I mean, I'd watched Mike play it when he first got it back in like 2007, 2008. I don't remember exactly when, but I mean, watching him play it was fine, but I saw him mid gameplay. When I started, it was just so huge, and it was a world that really kind of grabbed my attention, and it was very immersive right away. So for me, that's how it changed. It was just like, this is really big, and I definitely want to see more and see what this world is going to give me.
Cool. I kind of understand that, because playing that initial Mass Effect, it feels like you're dropped into the middle of this world in a way where you're already expected to understand the world that you live in, or the universe that you're playing in. And it's not presented in a way like, oh, let's give you all the background of how this world came to be. It's like, oh, we're dropping you in the middle of it, and you're starting your first mission, and you just have to absorb things as you go through. Yeah,
and everything's, an exposition dump. Pretty much every character you talk to, It's like, oh, the Shadow Broker. Well, who's the Shadow Broker? Oh, well, it's this, black arms dealer. Oh, okay. And then, and you have this race and that race. And, as opposed to many other games, like you were saying, there's not a whole lot of hand-holding. You're just like, here's the information. You just need to remember it. You just got to kind of process it however you are. But the world is going to be going on around you, whether you got it or not. Which, I mean, it's kind of good. It really just, that immersion, it just really kicks it up into high gear because of that.
Cool. Very good. How about you, Mike?
So for me, this entire series, it wasn't only just a series of amazing games. It was almost like I was taking part in like 3 seasons of a really cool sci-fi television show. And that was the first time I had a game that drew me into a world like that, where every time a new game was coming out, I couldn't wait to play it just to see where they were going in the story. And the fact that you could import your Shepard into the other games as you went along and continue to build on to your unique story that you were creating in the game. I had never experienced anything like that before, especially in a single-player game. Like, this was groundbreaking to me. And like Frank said, it was intimidating, especially the first time I got command to the Normandy and I opened that galaxy map for the first time and saw all the places you could go. I was like, man, like, what do I do next? I could do anything. You know, it was just really amazing to me. And I just love that those 3 games were just like mind-blowing. And I was obsessed with it, as Frank could probably tell you when I was playing it back then.
Mm-hmm. It really was. And kind of a testament to that too is that when I would sit and watch him, you know, like I was able to just sit there and watch him and enjoy it. And, you know, I would just ask him, oh, you know, what's happening on this planet? And Mike just give me the background while he's playing, you know, and going through, okay, well, this is what's happened. You know, this is the species that are on there. And this is my mission objective. You know, all this stuff that he's been absorbing this whole time he's been playing. So, you know, you could tell how much Mike really enjoyed it just by talking to him about it at the time.
So when this game was initially released, I know it was released first on Xbox 360, and even when it got released on PS4 or PS3, it wasn't until Mass Effect 2. Later on, Mass Effect 1 was finally released on PS3. But when you guys first played it, was it on Xbox 360, or was there a PC version available at the time?
It was on Xbox 360. I think it was an exclusive on there initially for a while. I don't remember when the PC version came out. I didn't get that until years later when I saw all of them on there.
Okay. Yeah, because I know. It wasn't exclusive for quite a while on the 360. And same for you, Geno. Your first experience was on the 360?
Yeah, definitely. It was day one. I mean, I still don't have it on PC. I just play it on consoles.
Oh, so Mass Effect was a day one purchase for you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's a funny story about that. Like my credit, not to jump ahead or anything, but you know, there was this moment where your credit is really good, and you have, you know, it's really great, and then there's this threshold that you just surpass. And I think I had ordered the limited editions of those. The first game, I ordered 2 of them, and I remember thinking to myself, this is the point of no return. If I do this, it's going to be really bad. And it was subsequently over many years. But that was the moment where everything went wrong. So yeah, in a good way. I mean, you know, obviously it made its mark. So
everything went wrong in a good way. I like that. Yeah. All right. So, Mike,
I actually.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I didn't play it until it was on PC, or at least that was my first experience with it, because I had gotten a 360, but I never bought the game initially. I got the 360 version after I got the PC version, so that's how I played it the first time.
Well, then let me ask you this, because I know one contention, especially the first game, had to do with the inventory system. Since you have experienced it on both systems, is the PC any better, or does it not matter?
I don't think it really matters, because I've only played it on the PC and PS3. I've never played the 360.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, I imagine the PS3 and the 360, are the same. Having the mouse support makes it easier, but it's still very, you know, you get all this stuff, and it's like, all right, convert to OmniGel or sell it,
right.
You know, because I mean, I played as a soldier in the first 2 games every single time. I only use the assault rifle and the sniper rifle. I don't use the shotgun, the pistol. I mean, I don't really see the point. It's either long distance, and if it's short distance, I'm just gonna pelt you with continuous fire.
Well, we'll definitely have an opportunity to talk more about what improvements have been made in the later series. All right, so Mike, coming right back to you. What are some things Mass Effect did right, and what are some things that can be improved?
Oh man, so I think it did a lot right, especially in narrative, story, and the voice acting was just excellent in my opinion. The main thing, especially in the first game, I loved how they balanced both the RPG elements and the action elements. I think they did that extremely well in that game. Probably the one thing, and I don't know if this is a negative or not, but as the games went on and they started moving away from that action, or from the RPG elements more into action shooter elements, it kind of bothered me a little bit that it felt less like an RPG, I guess. Because I remember in the first game spending a lot of time in the character selection screen, just comparing weapons and equipment. I had so many things by the end of the game that I just didn't even know that I had picked up. So I would spend,
Thank you.
So I would spend like 10, 15 minutes just sorting through everything. That's the one thing I think they could have improved on in the first game, is finding a way to sort all of that somehow.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if there was a way, but I never found one. I was just scrolling through tons of items and equipment until I found what I wanted.
Yeah.
But in the other two games, like, I pretty much just found a weapon set or a gear set that I liked and ended up using that for pretty much the duration of that game, of those games. I didn't do too much configuring of equipment in those games. So, in my opinion, I kind of missed that from the first game. But 2 and 3 were certainly way more polished and cleaned up than the first game was. So I think they focused on more things like visuals and game mechanics and things like that. But I always will miss those original RPG elements the way they were in the first game.
Yeah, and I think I'm with you on that one. I think the thing that bugged me the most in the second one was everyone was assigned a specific class and they had specific weapons that they could use, so you were very limited in your choices. And I never liked that in part 2. But, I mean, aside from that one complaint, yeah, it was something small comparative to the many things that it did right. How about you, Frank?
Kind of to pair Mike a little bit, you know, I think the voice acting, it is, although it is wooden, it is very sci-fi, which means it is good. You know, that the world building was amazing. I mean, really, really impressive how much, and you can see all the influences, you know, from like Star Trek, Star Wars, Firefly, and, you know, other popular sci-fi series, how they took it, they adopted it, and they were kind of homages, but then they also made them their own thing. I'd say they did a really good job of continuing the story for all 3 games. It was very, very cohesive. And even if you played, you know, the second or the third one first, you know, you still got enough of a background where you could fill in the blanks, as opposed to the first one where you're like super overwhelmed. But, you know, with like the Mass Effect Genesis comics where you could, you know, make the decisions, you know, they give you that little prologue and then they just send you on your way. As far as what they could improve on, or, you know, things that I didn't really care for in the first one, the inventory system, I'd say I would have an issue with that. I think that's probably the only thing, that because for me that first one is really good, and it's very much an archetype for the other 2 games, but I really like everything they did with the first game. You know, the micromanaging with the skill points, being able to put in all those upgrades for your weapons, for your armor, and everything like that. I loved it. And you could play with so many combinations. And yeah, I mean, some of them were redundant, some of them were unnecessary, but it was still fun to have those options available. As far as what I'd improve for the second and third game, well, with the second one, it really put me off because I played it as soon as I finished the first one because it was already out, and I really didn't like that you had to reload. I really liked the fact that, you know, you could just let your weapon cool down and continue fighting, but then since they focus on the action and everything like that, it's like, oh, well, you have to get the cooldown, you know, cartridges for your weapon. I didn't really care for that. The dialogue options it felt like they were cut it by 2/3, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there were less in 2.
And the same goes for 3, you know, way less dialogue options. But 3 did a better job of kind of balancing the RPG elements with the action. Still wasn't as fun as the first as far as the RPG elements went, but it did a better job than 2. And funnily enough, is 2's my least favorite, but it's the one I played the most. And it's not so much the gameplay; it's more the story. So, with 2 and 3, I'd say the dialogue options and the fact that they strip so much of the RPG elements, that's what I would have left in. And also, 2 felt very streamlined. I mean, you still had options to go places and do things in certain orders, but it's not like 1 where they just kind of let you roam the galaxy and go wherever you wanted, whether you're ready for it or not.
Right. Yeah, and it seems like Part 2 was released in order to fix those glaring issues with Part 1 that, I mean, it's obvious that EA's reaction or BioWare's reaction to doing Part 2 was because it wasn't accessible enough to a large audience, and that may have been an influence from EA. And by streamlining it the way they did, they made it more accessible, and then they put it on the PS3, which obviously had a bigger install base at that point in time. So it's obvious a lot of those decisions were made in order to bring in more people. And then once they grabbed all those people, then they went back with 3 and kind of brought back some of those things that were missing from 1. It's kind of like, in a way, the best of both worlds to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And how about you, Geno?
I don't remember analyzing any of the things that I liked or really disliked. The things that I really disliked were just kind of stick out. And the only thing I can remember is one particular character, but we'll get into that, I'm sure, later. So as far as mechanics and everything, I had a great time. I mean, all the way through it. So, I don't see anything wrong with it. I mean, it's fine.
So it's one of those things, and I think we can all agree on this, where the negatives of the game, or I should say it this way, the positives of the games far outweigh any negatives that pop up, even with the most glaring issues, because there's so much good that we can do that we can ignore the negative stuff and just get through it.
Yeah, I can agree with that statement.
Definitely. And we'll talk more about that in a bit.
Yeah. All right. So, Frank, what moment had the biggest impact for you during your first playthrough? What stuck with you?
Well, is that for each game or just for the entire trilogy?
I would think for the entire trilogy, but I mean, if you have a couple moments you want to share, I think we have plenty of time for that.
I'd say definitely in the first game when you actually had to choose between Kaiden and Ashley, because and it was kind of ruined for me because I did see Mike play it and he told me, he's like, oh, I have to choose one or the other. I cannot I can't save everybody. And for me, even though I didn't really care for either character, it was very impactful because your action had consequences. It was just, you had to lose one or the other. And I mean, there have been stories told before that, had that and everything, but not in a video game that really hit me like that, because they even carried it from the second to the third game. You see the surviving character, and even in the third game, Shepard makes reference to it. He's like, I was thinking about Kaiden because Kaiden's the worst character. So everybody chooses for him to die. So
worst overall, I don't know that I agree, but okay.
I can already predict who Geno doesn't like, but it's all right. But I'd say that was one of them, and then the other one was when Mordin died, because oh man, for the greater good, and I think he had one of my favorite character arcs.
Yeah.
As far as from when you met him in 2 to all the decisions made to where he ends up in 3. And I really don't want to even talk about it because, if you haven't played it, you should play it and see Mordin's character arc.
Yeah, it's
one and just see.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. You finish.
Oh, I was just going to say the transformation of a character, he's very determined, assertive one way, and with everything that he learns from it, and he does a complete 180, and you can respect both aspects of it, the way he started to where he ended up, because you could see that he was right from the beginning to the end. It's just something he had to experience and learn. And that character arc and the way it ends was just that was very upsetting, but at the same time also very cathartic.
Yeah, it's a testament to the good writing that was done with this game. Granted, there's people who will hook on the bad parts because of the sci-fi-esque part of it, but in general, I think BioWare set out to tell a very it's a sci-fi game, but like with the intention of most sci-fi stories, it's to use something. I'm trying to think of what the word is to replace with sci-fi, but it's supposed to introduce something unknown to humans to tell a very human story, and we're talking about, of course, emotionally. And I think a lot of times and throughout the Mass Effect trilogy, they do a really good job in the writing of hitting those emotional points, because you do become attached to these characters. And like you said, with Mordin in case, and he's not the only one, but his probably does have the best overall writing for his arc.
Yeah. So yeah, those are my moments.
How about you, Geno?
It's been a long time since I've played it. So what I can remember probably the most is everything that happens to Saren, like in the first game. I think he's a really interesting villain, and I think certainly he falls into like some of, like, he hits some of the same notes that every villain does, but I think the way that they portrayed him, and he's kind of like a tragic figure. I really, particularly the end, what happens there in the first game, that was really incredible. Just like when you reach the Citadel and it's burned it's burned down, and you're going to it. So that would be probably one of my favorite moments of the whole series.
Yeah, I think Saren's story arc in that first game is really fascinating, because they really tried to make a very tragic character. Because I mean, Saren was not a villain to start with. He was a well-regarded hero for what he did. And what was the name of the species that he was a part of? I always forget their name.
It's a Turian.
Turian, there you go. And and you could see it. I mean, we're of course we're going to talk about Garrus Vakarian, and I mean, even the way Garrus talks about him throughout that first game, to hear what he was like before, and then to suddenly become the villain, then to find out why he was the villain. Yeah. It is a very tragic story, and it was really well told. To me, he's still the best villain in the Mass Effect trilogy, because in the other two games,
I'd agree.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. And actually, did anybody read the novelization? Or was it Mass Effect Revelation, the one where it talks about when Anderson and Saren first had cross paths, where it tells that backstory?
Oh no, I did not.
No, I think I bought the novels. I haven't read them yet though.
You didn't read it either, Frank?
No, and that's why I was wondering if anybody had, because he talks about the evil thing that he had done, and so I was just wondering, if at that point he was already under the influence of the Reapers, or if he was just so bloodthirsty, or not bloodthirsty, cold-blooded and cutthroat, and very Machiavellian in his methods. So there is a backstory to Saren and Captain Anderson's first encounter, and we just need to actually read it at some point.
Yeah,
that's our next project.
I've got them here. I got the novels here somewhere.
So on our next project, we're going to read this book, and then we're going to come back and discuss it on our next podcast. And you, Mike, what were some of the biggest moments in your first playthrough?
Well, for me, the main one, and if I remember correctly, I think Frank was watching me go through this the first time, but it was a conversation with Sovereign in the first game. That was, to me, that whole dialogue was just really done well, and I like that the game lets you participate in that conversation with the dialogue wheel, rather than just throwing a cutscene at you. So
yeah,
I really enjoyed that they let you actually talk to him. And just that's the first time you realize how threatening the Reapers really were, and the threat they represented to the whole galaxy. It was just really cool for me. I liked that they had that element in there that's going to force everyone to work together, because there's already a lot of politics going on in that universe between all the different races, and he knew that at one point they're all going to have to come together to fight this external threat. And I thought that was written really well. Plus, they made like Sovereign and all the Reapers sound so menacing. It was so awesome. Like, they did a good job with the Reapers, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
I think part of the reason.
Definitely. No, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you finished, dude.
No, I was just gonna say that's pretty much like the most memorable part of that game to me. There are a lot of memorable parts though, but that was the one that I always look back to on the whole trilogy.
Yeah, I think part of what makes the Reapers work in the game, especially Sovereign, is they're just a force in the universe meant to maintain balance. That they have a purpose, and they're supposed to reset the universe so that way it can, regrow itself. So they're very, in a way, cold and calculating. It's like they're looking at a bigger picture that the rest of the species of the universe are not willing to accept, which is completely understandable because that means accepting being wiped out. So it is really interesting how they don't, like, the reason I feel that they come off menacing is because of how I guess immune they are to the same emotions that the rest of the species experience, because they're machines. It's just more like, hey, this is something we have to do because it needs to be done. And I think that's part of the reason why they come off as so menacing.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else to chime in, or are we good?
No, I think we're good for moments.
All right, so moving on to our next question. This is a tough one, but some of you guys may already have an answer. But which game is your favorite in the trilogy and why? And I'm going to start with you, Frank, on this one.
Okay, so it's easy for me. The first one is my favorite. Like you said, it's a very sci-fi story trilogy, and I love that hardcore sci-fi part of the trilogy just because, the world building, the politics, everything like that. They took all those really amazing influences, like I had mentioned before, and they put them into this. And so seeing and being introduced to all the characters, being introduced to all the races, the species, everything like that, it's such a delight having all the dialogue options, making the choices, and having those choices matter. Love that. The gameplay is probably the worst in the first one, but it's actually, I really love playing the gameplay in that one, even though I'd say the gameplay is best in 3, which is the funnest to play, but one is just my favorite, far and above. It doesn't have, all of my favorite characters, but it's got, a pretty good cast for the crew that first time around.
Yeah, it's definitely a great introduction to the trilogy, and it definitely sticks with you after you're done playing. I can totally see that, and why that's your one. How about you, Mike?
So for me, as much as I love the gameplay in 1, 2 is actually my favorite out of all of them, but mainly just because of the story.
Yeah.
I love the story in 2. I love how they, I didn't expect Shepard to be going with Cerberus in that one. You hear a little bit about Cerberus in the first one, but you don't really know the scope of what they are until the second one. Mm-hmm. I love the Elusive Man as a villain. I mean, the game made you hate that person so much, but I thought that was awesome because I didn't think anything would be as good as Saren, and I still think Saren's the best villain. But the Elusive Man was a pretty strong villain too, and I really liked his introduction into it. And also just because there were so many more characters to interact with, like double the roster, probably more by the time you got all the DLC characters. It was just like having all those people and every one of them having a loyalty mission to get to know them a little better. That's why I love playing through 2 so much. And I think all of the DLCs, except for maybe 1 or 2, I really enjoyed, especially the whole thing with the Shadow Broker.
Yeah. You know what? And you're saying that Saren is the best villain, which I agree with. I didn't really care for the collectors, and
yeah.
the 2 story was really, really good, and especially I think it's because it was so focused on the characters, and that's what made 2 really great. But the collectors as a threat, they were just kind of lame. I mean, they're very forgettable, and I think it was more just the dynamic between, Shepard and the Elusive Man that really helped cement, that future conflict that you could see brewing. But the main collector and the discovery that they were never mind. I don't want to say it. I don't want to spoil it.
I kind of don't want to spoil it either, but just, I mean, what the main collector is, so that kind of redeemed it for me. But yeah, I do agree that as the main villain, I focus more on the Elusive Man and things going on between the characters rather than stopping the collectors, in my mind. Mm-hmm. That was just kind of the end game, like what you're all going to do. But what made that such a story so great for me was having to recruit all those characters and help them with their own individual personal problems and stuff. Right. That's what made that story so amazing for me.
Right. So a couple things I want to talk about. So one, doing those missions with those characters, because you have to build towards them, does one of two things. It either endears those characters to you, or it makes you regret having that character join your team.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a real human emotion you have, right? There's going to be people that you like and you don't like. So they do a really good job of that. It's just a matter of personally what you think. The great thing about the Elusive Man, so first of all, I want to talk about the voice acting, because picking up Martin Sheen as the voice actor for the Elusive Man was just like spot on. Like, usually when I think of Martin Sheen, I think of Apocalypse Now, and that he's the father of Charlie Sheen and Emilio Estevez. That's it. Those are the only two things I think of. But he did an incredible job in that game as the Elusive Man, because when you're dealing with him, when he asks you to do things, even though you're like, well, I know it's not right, but there's enough in there to make you think, but maybe he's right. Maybe this is the way to go. And that's what makes him such a fascinating villain, because he's not just a plain old, oh, I'm good or I'm bad. He's not black hat, white hat. It's, he's that blend, you're not sure. Like, maybe he does have the best intentions, but the way he goes about is bad. But ultimately, that's not the case. But it takes time for you to really get that. And then I totally agree with Frank on the collectors being, I mean, it's obvious they're just the faceless hordes that you have to deal with. That's the whole purpose in that game.
I also wanted to add real quick, that whole thing about being part of Cerberus and not sure, like, what the Elusive Man, if he's good or evil. I really like when you run into, for me it was Caden, it depends on what you do in the first game, but when whatever character it is, they have that reaction to you, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? Like, this isn't you. And that's kind of like, that was powerful for me, because that was when I was like, maybe I am like the bad guy right now, like, for that moment. Like, the other characters are just so shocked to see you working with such a seedy operation.
Mm-hmm. And, another reason that 2 is really great is because if you play as female Shepard, you can romance Garrus, which is the ultimate romance.
Well, hold off, Frank. We'll get to those in a minute. All right, Geno. Favorite game in the trilogy?
The first one, because you have the airlock. Seals it for me.
That was kind of cool, actually, going through that little scene.
So that was it.
So that's the defining characteristic that deems the first one your favorite. Are you there, Geno?
Yep.
Okay. So you have nothing else to add?
No, I think that sums it up.
So let me ask you this then, just so we can get a little more out of you. Hang on. Let me ask him this. Okay. So, is it one of those things where you don't want to, or it's difficult to pick out your own because you look at the trilogy as one entire game as opposed to 3 individual parts? Does that have an impact on why you're not choosing a specific game with more detail?
No.
right.
That airlock is
quite literally sold me at the airlock. So that's it.
All right. So, with that being said, just throwing my own in there. It is difficult for me to pick a specific game, just because it is one whole story. The one I always pick the gear toward or lean towards because of the gameplay is probably 2. I think I enjoyed playing through that one the most because of the gameplay and the story. I guess in a way, story-wise, it's kind of like we're always making sci-fi references, but the Empire Strikes Back of the series, and I think that's part of the reason why it sticks with me. But
yeah,
it's hard to argue against that airlock scene, though. That's really good. So.
I'm telling you, that's the defining characteristic.
The one problem with the PC version, though, is that airlock scene loads too fast, so you can't enjoy it.
Aww. There you go, Geno. Don't ever play the PC version.
Wasn't planning on it.
Right.
As opposed to PS3 where those load times or.
Oh yeah, you can walk away and get something to eat.
Yeah.
Chill.
Play Mass Effect 2 all the way through, and then
boot up Mass Effect 3 on the PC, and then get to that same point.
So, this is so I asked these guys for question suggestions, and Frank sent a few, and this one in particular is a very frank question. Who is your favorite character, and why is it Garrus Vakarian? So, we'll start with Geno, favorite character, and you've already established it's someone other than Garrus. So, who is your favorite character, Geno? Why?
Oh, it's definitely Caden. Oh, yeah. I love Caden. Great character. Really great.
But what is it about Caden that you like?
Actually, I hate Caden. It's one of the worst characters in the game. Other than Garrus, actually, again, I think it goes back to somebody like Saren. I think more like people you don't interact with as much. More, they're just kind of in the background. So somebody like Saren, really like who is the captain?
Captain
the
Anderson?
other guy, Anderson. I really like Anderson. I really like how at the end of 3, how he's there for that. I mean, so people you interact with, not necessarily a character within your party. So probably Anderson, Saren, the Elusive Man. All of those guys are interesting as well.
Well, and then,
to be my picks.
Anderson is voiced by
Keith David.
Keith David. I always mix him and David Keith up. So. So yeah.
And he did an amazing. I mean, granted, he's an amazing actor and voice actor, but he really made that character, just like Martin Sheen, as you mentioned earlier, made the Elusive Man.
Right. Yeah, that was excellent.
That would be my yeah. Just had very interesting. They were great. Yeah.
Okay, so is Caden your number one hated character?
No. Are we talking about that now too? Or are we waiting for that?
That's part of the same question.
Okay. Let me tell you. Tali, I couldn't stand Tali from the moment she sets foot on your ship. I can't stand her. Second would be the Rex. It's boring, obtuse, just unnecessary. And every time I grip my teeth because I got to go through those ridiculous loyalty missions for them. I mean, Jacob's pretty dull too, but he's just dull.
Wait,
there's hatred running through my veins for the other two.
I think you're talking about Grunt, though.
You're talking about Grunt, because Rex is only in the first game.
Right.
That's right. Grunt and Rex are just one collective snot ball, I
think Geno would be on the side of the eclipse if he were living in this universe, I guess.
Yeah, that's all I've got to say on that.
Oh, that's good. Okay, so what about the romantic portion of the game? Did you buy into it, or did you just go through with it? And 2, did you have a particular character that you preferred romanticizing with?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
I'm pretty wretched. I wouldn't romance any one of them, I don't think. It's funny how they kind of really they make Miranda like this in 2. They make her like this, ultra seductive. I don't know. Like it kind of directs you there. But, I don't know. I wasn't buying what they were selling. I don't even remember who I romanced. It was probably, I think, because I read somewhere that if I romanced Ashley in the first game. That's like, oh my God, how boring. Then if she lives, which I made her live, then she's not really in the second game. So then I had to like stay abstinent. So just by default, stuck with
Sure.
toast.
Toast.
I like how you stated the way you worded it. I made her live. Oh, you're not getting out of this series. You're gonna live, whether you want to or not.
It was one of the worst decisions I ever made. Beside the point. Anyway, that's my choice.
That's good. All right. So, Mike, coming to you, favorite character and why?
Well, I love this question. Why is it Garrus Vicarian? Garrus and Liara ended up being my mains throughout the entire trilogy, ultimately. But for me, it's interesting because my favorite character actually is the Commander Shepard character in itself, and specifically the female version of Shepard. I don't know why, but I really gravitated more towards Jennifer Hale's portrayal of the character. I really felt that Fem Shep was
More nuanced.
Yeah, she was my Mass Effect character that I always liked and wanted to see in that story. And I do like Mark Meer's portrayal. I played as a male Shepard and a female Shepard. I did a Paragon and a Renegade on both sides just to see all the options. But I always gravitated towards like Paragon female Shepard because for me that's overall my favorite in the series. There are tons of characters I love, but like just playing as Fem Shep with Jennifer Hale's voice was my definitive experience in that game.
And I think we actually had this conversation before, and I think you had mentioned it too, Bobby, that Jennifer Hale's portrayal, she had so much more range, and she was more interesting to listen to, and I totally agree with that. The male Shepherd, it was very milquetoast. It was very boring, especially, you can see that there's an exclamation point at the end of the dialogue option, but he's like, and that's what I said, or whatever. But it's just delivered without any gusto, without any real weight behind the words. Whereas Jennifer Hale, you could hear, just when she was excited, you could hear when she was upset or annoyed. She just has that depth more than the male Shepherd had.
Well, and I think a lot of that has to do with the direction, the way they were directed in the first game, particularly the male character, because from reading some of the interviews they had, it seemed that he received more direction about, well, your character is a avatar for the player, and so he came off more flat, while Jennifer Hale she did what she did in her own way and gave the character life, especially in that first game, and it stayed throughout the entire series. I think his voice acting improved as with the characters that went on, because then they decided to let them define the characters. So I think his voice acting in 2 and 3 in particular are a lot better than compared to 1. But Jennifer Hale throughout is correct. I mean, it's like you name her, but Commander, you're maybe playing as Commander Shepard, but she is her own character as opposed to just being an avatar. And it's like you said, because of those nuances in her voice acting, where she does come off as, even when there's very emotional moments where she has to stay steady for the team, you can still hear those undertones of either concern or fear or joy in her voice, even though she's trying to maintain some kind of composure. And so it does come off really strong. And I think that is probably the best performance, which is why I totally see why Mike would pick her as his favorite character.
Mhm.
So,
So
Frank,
who's your most hated character, Mike?
I don't know if I have one. I would have to say,
It's Tali.
yeah, although I never used Tali, to be honest with you, but I did love her story at the end of 3, like in that mission, and I don't want to get too into it, for spoilers, but
Yeah.
I did like with her, if you did things a certain way, her and the other character, Legion, at the end, I thought that was really good. But I have to say, as far as hated characters, and I don't hate this character, but again, the Elusive Man, like going through it, he was such a good villain, he made me hate him so much. And there's one other character I do really hate, and it was Ambassador Udina. He was the one that I was like, man, I want this, like, I did the smear campaign against him, I did everything against him, like, that character was just really annoying to me.
it was a spineless
It
coward.
But that's good writing. I mean,
Yeah, it is good writing. And that was the whole point, and I love that that both him and the Elusive Man elicited that kind of response from me. That just shows how good the writing was in these games.
And then how about romantic interests in the game? What did you think of the romantic interest, and who did you romance?
So the first time in the first game, I didn't romance anyone because I didn't even know that was an option. But the second time through, I did Liara because it kind of made sense to me anyway. And playing as female shepherd with romancing Liara was also really awesome. But
I have to say that's cool that they did that. They made that an option.
Yeah,
which is
because
cool.
in the first game, I mean, eventually in 2 and 3, you could have a gay love interest, but they didn't have it in the first one. It was either Ashley or Liara only for male shepherd.
But I did Liara in the first one and ended up on the second one. I did Liara. She was my romantic interest in both of them, which was kind of cool because by the time you get to the third one, when you load that character, like your shepherd into that one, you meet Liara for the first time, her reaction is different. Like, she's like really excited to see her, whereas if you play through the game and you don't do that, it's just a normal conversation. But yeah, that was pretty much it for my romances in this fictional universe.
All right, Frank, and why Garrus Vicarian?
I love Garrus because he is so loyal to Commander Shepard from the get-go. He is one of the only ones who's a part of your crew in all 3 games, which is a testament, especially because you're working with Cerberus, which is human-centric. They don't care about any of the alien species, and even though they're doing that, Garrus is like, no, I'm loyal to Shepard. And, his character becomes more interesting. I mean, the first game, he's interesting as it is because, he was a law enforcement officer, but he knew that he needed to kind of bend the rules and even break them at time if he wanted space frontier justice, if you will. And so that already showed that he had, independent thought, which I really liked. And he became funnier and definitely more human throughout the 2 and 3, and I really like that as well. And if I play Fem Shep, that's the only person that I romance. I mean, in the first one, sometimes I'll romance Liara, and then it's kind of heartbreaking when you start romancing Garrus, and then she's like, "Oh, you're with Garrus now," So I'm like, I just won't romance everybody. I'll save myself for Garrus. So, I mean, he's the ultimate companion, and that's why I love him so much. Loyal to Shepard, just really funny, really great, and he's a bird person, and that's just funny as well.
Wait, you said he's a bird person?
Yeah, he's a bird person.
Okay.
Turians are bird.
No, I got you.
Bird race.
I just didn't know if you meant he's a person who's a bird or he's a person who enjoys owning birds.
Probably both.
Like he's a birder.
A birder? I've never heard that, but there's a new word right there.
So, couple things I just want to share. I really love Tali's character.
Oh, God.
Sorry, Geno.
Well, I never said I didn't like her. I just said I never used her. So
No, I know.
You know what?
Like,
I would use her, but in my earlier playthroughs. But continue, Bobby.
yeah. So yeah, definitely as a team member, as far as taking her out and using her in your fights and stuff, I only used her early on. But from the standpoint of what her species was going through and how she was conflicted, especially in the third game when they bring in, well, the stuff that Mike said we weren't going to talk about. So, just the way the fleet has to deal with the fact that they created the what were the name of the robots?
The Geth.
The Geth, and then they were responsible for creating the Geth, and then they had to find a way to create peace with them or try to wipe each other out. And I thought it was really interesting, and I thought her character came off as very determined, but very not confident, and you're responsible for being that character to help her build that confidence, which is why she resulted in being the character that she did, which was either both to her benefit or to her detriment, depending on the choices you made. And I thought it was really fascinating, that character. Like I romanced Liara in the first game, but I romanced Tali the last two games. And I think maybe because of the I don't know, because of the romance options, if I had more opportunities to then have conversations with her that dealt with more of that stuff. But I thought she was a really fascinating character. Not to say that I thought any other characters were lesser. I'm like Mike. I don't think there's a character in this game that I dislike that's not supposed to be disliked because they were written that way. Even Kaiden, as dull as he may have came off, I still enjoyed having him as a character in the game. Or Jacob. I mean, they were there. The only character that I thought was boring was there was that DLC guy from Mass Effect 2, and I don't even remember his name. It was an
Zaid.
Yeah, that one.
The generic angry bounty hunter, pretty much.
He was a boomer. It was obvious that he was a boomer. So.
And I hate to interrupt you, but let me just tell you, this time I went through Mass Effect 2, and I got to the end, Holly was dead. I had never been so happy to think that she's not going to be in my party in the third game. But then over, because I was concerned, I said, I'm going to start Mass Effect 3, but I need you to look at, who's alive and who's dead. And he's like, dude, you have to play it over. They have to all be alive. I was really, really upset. But not only did I have to play it over, but that she would live. That's all. Go ahead. You can continue now.
You know what? And I have to kind of disagree with you, Bobby, because you said Kaiden and Jacob, and they're kind of two sides of the same coin because they're so uninteresting. That's why, to me, you could just take both those characters out and it wouldn't affect the story.
Oh no, I agree with that. I'm just saying that they didn't do anything to the game that made me think, I don't want these guys here. I don't think they bring anything new to the table. I just don't think them having there is a detriment to the story either. That's what I'm saying.
But to me, they're just excess baggage. If it's something that's extra where you can cut it out, then fine. And that's the only reason that I don't like those characters, just because they're so boring.
Yeah,
they're boring. And Zaid, I can see why you don't like him. And I mean, I don't really care about him. With him, actually, he's the only one where I choose a renegade option to kill the person he wants to kill, because that dude's garbage. But he's still more interesting than Jacob. I want a family. And Kaiden, who either wants male shepherd or wants female shepherd, depending on whether or not you romance them. And he's always the one that I choose to kill off, as annoying as Ashley is. He's always the one that I kill off.
And it's true. When I played through it, he was my choice as well. It was part of the thing where, Ashley was kind of annoying, but I felt that Ashley would be more of a benefit to the human race than leaving Kaiden alive.
And you know what?
Stronger combat strength.
Yeah.
He did. But Ashley was prettier. She had a better body. So
no, Ashley had better combat strength.
I don't remember because I never used I never used either of them. Except for that initial mission. But once you can choose different people, I get Garrus in there.
As soon as I got Garrus, like he was my main, and then Liara right after that. So
yeah, it was pretty much Garrus for me. One of the characters we didn't talk about that I also really liked was Thane. I liked Thane.
Oh yeah,
cool.
He was awesome.
Especially his backstory. I really enjoyed playing through. I don't know. I think it's more so the characters, like Mike brings up the story and everything from 2 that really stick with me, because you have Thane and then you have what's the tattooed characters? I was going to say Zach, but I don't remember that.
No, it's Jack.
And even though personality wise I found her kind of dull because she never really changed a lot except if you romanticized her, still the concept of her character I thought was pretty interesting. But then of course you have the whole thing with Morden. I actually like Erdnot Rex in the first game. I thought he was probably one of my favorite characters to interact with just because of his responses. Kind of like where you talk about Garrus. Garrus is, especially as the series goes on, becomes very sarcastic. Your interactions with Garrus are like, it literally is 2 friends having a conversation and bantering with each other. And I think Rex had a little bit of that, at least for me, playing through. Of course, I am talking from the experience of having only played through these games once, and these are just the memories that stick with me. You guys have played through these, especially you and Frank and Mike have played through these games multiple times, so I think you guys have a better hold on how these characters stand out. But those are the things that stand out to me when I think about those characters.
Yeah. I'd say an honorable mention for favorite characters is actually Legion, just because I love robot characters, and especially sentient robot characters. So the fact that he was able to actually do what he did, and the way you interact with him, and you just you have a Geth on your crew by the end of the second game. I thought that was amazing. As far as who I romanced, though, the first time I romanced Ashley, because she's pretty character, she's hot, and despite what everybody else does, I've never really wanted to bank aliens as a hobby. So I romanced Ashley, I think through my first initial playthrough of the trilogy, and then I would play around with different ones. Like the second time I romanced I think Liara in the first game, then Miranda, and the third game I think Ashley again. But I tried several of the options just to see how the character relationships would develop. And I'd say the funniest one was probably Jax, just because by the third game, like Bobby said, there's not a whole lot of change in her character, but there's one scene when you're helping her out at school, and she just grabs you and kisses you out of nowhere, and it's just really funny.
I just realized I was thinking back to my playthrough of Mass Effect 2, and I realized I'm full of shit. I think the real reason I romanced Tali is because I wanted to see what was under the suit.
What was under the...
Oh, that's right.
Which I was severely disappointed because it was not revealed. Not in Mass Effect 2. And it was...
And even in 3, it was like that stock photo.
Really
Yeah.
You never really see her.
I don't think they had an idea of what was under those suits. I think they just copped out on that.
It kind of always looked to me like they had glowing eyes.
Right. Yeah. They did show that, or it did look like that in the mask, that you could kind of see their eyes, but they did that for the purpose of also you being able to make a connection, because a lot of times when people communicate, it's through eye contact, right?
Yeah.
So that was interesting. And then the other thing I just want to say, Geno referenced Miranda earlier, and I totally agree with Geno that you had Ashley, who is this soldier, so she had the physically fit and trim and attractive athletic body. And then all of a sudden you have Miranda with this voluptuous, large-breasted, large-ass, just...
Hourglass figure.
Hourglass figure. It was a huge contrast, and it was funny how, of course, being a man, you're going to see that type of figure, and instinctively you're going to be like, wow, that's attractive. But of course, playing through Mass Effect, you see the character that she is and what she brings to the table, and you're kind of like, yeah, bitch, get out of here.
Yeah. You know,
I
what?
actually got attractive by the third game.
Well, in the third game, honestly, she kind of looks like she's a porn star.
Yeah, exactly. Ashley got attractive.
She got attracted by the
You know what? One reason I really did like to romance Miranda, because I mean, I did romance her a couple times. I think I played through this trilogy at least 5 times, all 3 games. And I romanced her a couple times because I actually really like her voice actress and the voice actress and her likeness, Yvonne Strahovski, because I had watched her in Chuck, and I thought she was, really beautiful, and she was really funny and everything like that. So, the fact that she was in Mass Effect 2, also, that, like, I was already attracted to her, so that's one of the reasons that I decided to romance her.
Mm. Yeah, I actually don't have anything against her. She, like, voice acting, like, again, we've always talked about how the voice acting in this game is really good. There's very few of them that are really poorly done. Hers was obviously really well done, but it's like, I think Geno brings up a good point. It's just the contrast where you have very normal characters, or I guess characters whose physical fitness fits what they're doing, and then suddenly introduce Miranda. But at the same time, I mean, she's what what do they call him, a biotic? Or
yeah, she's a biotic.
She's a biotic, right?
And then she's artificially enhanced,
right?
Because yeah,
and it makes sense. I mean, the elusive. So from a standpoint of the way her character looks, and the elusive man using her to 1, keep an eye on you, and 2, to bring you in, it completely makes sense from a character standpoint. But at the same time, I never had any interest in romanticizing her game.
You mean romancing?
Yeah.
Or romanticizing her. I like the
or
way
romanticize.
Geno, you've been quiet this whole time. You have nothing to add?
Oh, no, I said everything.
I have said enough. we have been on this one long. All right, so moving on to our next question. What is your opinion of the conclusion to the Mass Effect Trilogy? So this is a big one for us. We have discussed this at different points. Geno made us wait an entire year before we could have this discussion when the game first came out, and I'll let Geno explain why we had to wait a year. So Geno, we'll start with you. Your opinion of the conclusion of the Mass Effect Trilogy.
Why do we have to wait a year?
Oh, dude, come on.
Because it was in the vault.
Why?
Because it was in the vault.
Yeah, I thought it was like some other reason. Oh yeah, so I'll only play games. Everything that comes out in a year, I won't open it until Christmas. So I'm always about a year and a half behind these guys, or even more. I finally get to play it. Do you want my opinion on the ending?
Yes, that's what we're asking about.
So a lot of people have a lot of problems with it. I don't have any problem with it. I understand they were built to believe a certain thing and it wasn't that way, but I'm not wasn't upset about that. I think the whole last game is the ending. I mean, it's pretty much the longest ending sequence you could get. So I was fine with the ending. I was fine with the way it turned out. Of course, I could nitpick and say I want more. I want this and that. My the commitment to it, blah blah blah. But just to me, I was satisfied. I loved it, and it's over, and that's really it for me.
Is there anything about the ending that you would change or add to it?
I mean, I guess the general complaints that people have, they wanted more, their choices to affect this and that, but I also can't see another way for it to have ended, because that's how it ended. I don't have really any other sort of point of reference or want or desire, because all of the things that I wanted to see, I saw. So yeah, that's really it. That's it for me.
Okay, interesting. Mike, how about you?
So this is a pretty loaded question for me, because the whole game itself was fantastic, like all 3 of them, in my opinion. And for me, the part about the ending that I liked, I mean, it wasn't the ending, but everything leading up to that final battle, and seeing all the ships from the different races you recruited, and that to me was so amazing. And then you get to the actual ending part where it's basically like, well, just walk over here or walk over there, depending on what you want to do or what color explosion you want to see. And that kind of disappointed me, just because I was really looking forward to having to play through all 3 games again to do different choices and see what that did to the ending. And basically all I had to do was save right before it and do the walk in the other direction to see what the other ending was. So that part did bother me, but it was the whole journey of getting to that part was so amazing that I can honestly forgive it at this point.
So to elaborate on what Mike is saying, because I know we're trying to avoid spoilers, but ultimately this game's been out for, almost a decade as an entirety now, right? And the ending of the game results in 3 choices, and they're defined by 3 different colors, is what Mike was talking about. And ultimately, whatever decisions you made up to that point don't impact the choices available to you. You always have those 3 choices. That's what we're discussing here.
What always kind of bothered me too is that the 3 colors are blue, green, and red. I mean, why didn't they do blue, purple, and red? Kind of like the blending of blue and red. I mean, whatever.
Does seem like a missed opportunity.
There you go.
Yeah, but I mean, overall, that question is more like, to me, it's more, how do you feel? I mean, not the color question that Frank was saying, but the what we're actually talking about. But I do feel like the overall journey of the game is more like the point of it. Kind of like what Geno said, like the 3rd game is like one really long ending of the whole thing. And that's how I see it. Like, as disappointing as that last ending was, it doesn't affect my overall enjoyment of the series as a whole, and I still love playing through the game, even though I know that an ending's coming.
Frank?
So, I am one to support the popular opinion in that I hate the ending. I really hate the ending because all of your choices literally don't matter by the end. And yes, it's a great journey, which is why I'm gonna be replaying it again soon. But I just kind of think back to National Lampoon's Vacation. They go through this long road trip, and then at the end, Wally World is closed. It's a slap in the face.
That's a really good analogy.
There you go.
It's like all of this, this was the end goal, and quite literally the opposite happened. I thought I was going to have choice. I thought that everything would matter. I thought that all the decisions that I would make would give me a conclusion to the story that I was making, which BioWare and EA said would happen, and it didn't. The exact opposite. Whether I played as a renegade, whether or not I did all these stories, it doesn't matter at the very, very end. And to me, that a failed ending, it's terrible. The story's great, but the ending, talk about not sticking the landing at all. And I think what even kind of made it worse is that to kind of sidestep the criticism, they ended up coming out with the extended cut ending, and they had, I think, an extra ending as well, where you don't make any choice at all, and
you just stand there,
and you have like the worst possible outcome because you didn't make a decision. But the extended cut actually poked lots of holes in what a lot of fans thought about for the indoctrination theory, which there's 2 documentaries on YouTube, and I know I had sent them to you, Bobby, and I know you had watched them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you had watched them, Mike, but where
I saw one of them, but yeah.
Yeah. So the idea is that the whole 3rd game, because of certain things that happen.
Hey, Frank, before you continue, can you explain what indoctrination is?
Okay, so the Reapers, they are these really high intelligent, they're the main bad guys of the series. They're technologically, they're hundreds of thousands of years more advanced than any other species in the galaxy. And so they actually have the ability to influence life forms to serve them, and they do it using, I don't know, it's like I think both alpha, delta waves. They're able to send out these signals that affect the person thinking, their subconscious, and everything like that, so that they end up just serving the Reapers. And the way you get indoctrinated is either both directly and indirectly. Directly, of course, where they exert their force upon you, and indirectly because just being in their presence will slowly influence you over time. And in the third game, there were lots of hints that Shepard's mind is under attack indirectly because he's been exposed the most to Reapers, and because of that, they're just all these breadcrumbs that support this theory that a lot of fans have, that by the end of the game, those choices are actually happening in his mind. And so whatever choice you make, it just determines whether or not Shepard is alive at the end. And I mean, that's a big spoiler, but sorry.
That's right. It's an old game. But this is indoctrination, of course, is what caused Saren to become the villain that he became in the first game.
Yes. And so if you have the highest possible score for support forces that go with you to the last battle, you get the best ending where Shepard survives, or at least it's hinted at that he survives. And what doesn't make sense is with the extended cut, they pretty much just say, oh, these were the results because of Shepard's choices. And literally they streamlined it even more, because whether you made the decision to synthesize everybody, or to send the Reapers away, or to destroy the Reapers and all the Mass Effect relays, the extended cut pretty much says this is the outcome of any choice you made. So to me, that made it even worse, because it's the exact same cutscene, and they're all still images, so you know that they just tacked it on in probably a couple weeks.
An afterthought.
Exactly, and that's why I have such a big issue with it. I mean, it's like a Stephen King ending. That dude cannot write endings to save his life after 1985. But the ending to me, it always matters, because if it's ambiguous, at least then you can play with some ideas, then you can generate conversations. But with the way that everything was just streamlined and then pretty much put into one, this is the way it ends. For a game trilogy that has so many options, for a game trilogy that had so many different ways the story could have gone, by the end, it's just such a letdown. But don't get me wrong, the trilogy, the journey, is why I will go back and play it every single time, all the way through with every single story option. Even though I know that by the time I get to the very end, I won't even want to see the end. But seeing all that story all over, it's just amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting, because usually when people complain about the conclusion, they focus on the fact that they've made all these choices and now they feel that their choices don't impact. But you're also talking about how even with the existing endings that are there, that none of them seem satisfactory, regardless of having to make only those three choices. I guess what I'm trying to say is that you have the issue where your choices don't seem to impact the ending, and then the endings that are available to you don't have a satisfying conclusion, right? Is that what I'm understanding? Yep. Okay.
That too, yeah, because of that extended cut DLC.
And which just made things worse, okay.
Yeah. Actually, the only way you can not get that extended cut ending is if you don't do anything, and they pretty much just say, everybody died, and they show one of the markers that Liara had created just in case all life was wiped out, kind of like what the Protheans did. And you just you just see it in a big green open field, kind of, and that's the end of the game. So there's that ending, which I'd say is probably more satisfying than, oh yeah, well, these were all the things that happened. Even if you chose the Reapers to go away, this is what happens. Oh, even if you choose Synthesis, this is what happens. Oh, if you destroy the Reapers, this is what happens. It's all the same with the extended cut DLC. So,
right, and then I think you bring up a fair point with those conclusions because they all fit. It's like they're pegs, right? And they all fit in a particular hole. So you have your Synthesis ending, which is like the ultimate happy ending, where biotic or where living things and robotic things, I guess, become one in a way, right? Where everybody becomes the same, and then you have your living things happy ending, and then you have your robots thing happy ending, and it's just those three specific conclusions. There's no blending of those conclusions, which would be more realistic, I guess. Which is why I can totally understand why everyone getting wiped out is probably the most satisfying of those available endings, because it's the one that probably makes the most sense. It's just the repeated cycle of what's already happened before.
Yeah. So actually, we have 3 distinct opinions on these endings. Geno satisfied, Mike's kind of like, oh, and me, I'm just like, it's garbage.
But it's creates an interesting well, I guess it would be more than a dichotomy, but it's just interesting how this ending has really impacted everyone. Because yeah, you're right. When it first happened, lots of people are angry about it, and I think ultimately the thing that bothered me the most was just not my choices ultimately not being able to determine the overall story, and I just or the overall result, and I just had to go, oh well, it's A, B, or C, and ultimately that's the portion that probably bothered me the most, not the endings themselves. But yeah, they were still a little unsatisfying from that standpoint. But that's part of the reason why I also like the indoctrination thing. I mean, like you said, when they started dropping those breadcrumbs in 3, I immediately started thinking about, well, crap, is he indoctrinated? And then the way it concludes with him walking up to the to Sovereign. Wait, not Sovereign. Is it
Harbinger.
Harbinger.
When he's walking up to Harbinger, and just things are happening around him, and you're just marching up to there, you kind of get this feeling. And then when he's actually in Harbinger, and he's hearing Anderson, even though earlier it mentions that Anderson may be dead, or he may not be within range of speaking to him. It's like, where's this coming from?
Well, I think you're actually in the Citadel, aren't you? When you at the very end. I thought you got beamed up to the Citadel.
Oh, to the Citadel. There you go. You're in the Citadel.
You're and also your face is like messed up too. Like something's going on with Shepard, and that also kind of plays into the indoctrination thing, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things. I mean, and there is DLC for Mass Effect 3, but before it had come out and people had played it, there were rumors and alleged leaks that it would be the indoctrination DLC, where you'd actually be able to see, or at least affect the outcome, depending on whether or not you got indoctrinated. And then, of course, they ended up coming out with Leviathan and Omega and the Citadel DLC, none of which, I mean, all they do is they just kind of piggyback onto the story. I mean, if you don't play them, there's no real impact. I mean, they add a little bit to the lore for Leviathan. Omega, you get to see Arya's, part of the story in 3, and Citadel's like this goofy Ocean's 11 style thing.
Okay.
I think
Omega's the best one.
But I mean, if they had at least left it and not done the extended cut DLC, and kind of played with fans a little bit and just being like, it's possible he was indoctrinated, it's possible that this was going on in his mind, and just left it like that, I think I would have been more okay with it. Because that indoctrination theory, there's 2, like the same guy did 2 separate analyses that are very similar, but he brings up different points. I suggest you guys look it up. They're long. They're an hour and a half, I think, each. Yeah. But they're worth the watch because that dude really goes into depth. And I don't remember the name of the guy, but you can totally check it out.
I'll drop a link in the description in case anyone's interested.
Okay.
All right, so I think that's enough on the conclusion of the trilogy. Otherwise, we'll spend forever just talking about this conclusion, man. There's so much to discuss.
No, I think we're good. I think we got the points across.
So let's talk. So we've only been talking about the trilogy. We have been ignoring what's the term? The elephant in the room, so to speak. And this brings us to our next question. Have you played Andromeda, which was the 4th game in the series? And if yes, did you enjoy it? Why or why not? And if no, would you be willing to? Why or why not? So let's start with you, Mike.
So yes, I have played it. So this one I have not played all the way through it, and there's a reason for that. I bought the game on PC on launch day, and I had nothing but problems with it from a technical standpoint. It was just, I booted up the game, the graphics were already messed up. The entire game launched with this green tint that I hadn't realized wasn't intentional until like an hour into the game. So I turned it off, I relaunched it, and then it fixed the colors. And then all the characters started glitching and froze, and there were just so many technical issues with it that I gave up and decided to wait for a patch of the game, which they did eventually do, and I still haven't gone back to it. So
would you be willing to give it another shot?
I'm currently playing through all of them right now. I just started Mass Effect 1 again. And probably I would, honestly. I mean, I have the game. I might jump into it after Mass Effect 3 and just see how far I can get into it, because I would like to get my own opinion of the game. I've just heard what other people have said so far.
Right.
Hopefully it won't be as glitchy this time.
How about you, Frank?
I have not played it, so I kind of saw the writing on the wall from the first trailer, and honestly, at this point, I know they've patched it, they've fixed a lot of the bugs and glitches and stuff, but honestly, I don't have an interest in it because it's part of the same universe, but it doesn't have anything to do with the original characters. And one of the reasons I love the original Mass Effect trilogy is, well, because of the characters and that story. And, you're literally in another galaxy. There's not very many different races. They're telling their own story. It's a bunch of kids, they're all really young. And I don't know. It just, from when I had seen it, I had already lost interest in it from that first trailer. What actually intrigued me more was Mike had talked about a long time ago, if they had done a follow-up, it would have been way more interesting if they did a new trilogy set, anywhere between like 100 to 200 years into the future, and the new bad guy is actually Shepard. And I thought that would have been way more interesting than what we actually got. And it was funny because it seemed more like Mike was just spitballing it, but I was like, oh man, this sounds really interesting. Keep going.
That was playing into the whole indoctrination theory at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought that would have been a cool follow-up to it if they did do that.
Yeah. Well, seeing that, you should totally just do a fan fiction follow-up and just tell your story, man. Let it be heard,
I should. Maybe one of these days, and then I'll get sued by EA.
No, you guys, as long as you don't sell it for profit.
Oh, well, I totally sell it for profit.
Just make sure to sell it to EA.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, at this point, it's been too long for me to have an interest in Andromeda, to me to actually start it. So, would I be willing to play it? No, because I know it's a Mass Effect game, so you're still gonna have to, sink about anywhere between 25 to 50 hours in it, and with me already not having any interest, I don't see the point. Not for me, anyway.
How about you, Geno?
I mean, have the game. I'm kind of thinking I should go to the place where I have it in my house and finally toss it out, because I don't think I'll ever. I think I'll have the drive to put it in the PlayStation. So just to me, it looks like looks like I don't know, Degrassi High or something. It just really, I could care less, you know. No, and I'd like to add one more thing that I think the series should just die. I think there's no reason to hack any other game with that name on it. I think it did what it was supposed to do. Not everything goes on for 60 sequels. Not everything is Assassin's Creed. So I think what we have is good, and let's just do something else, and then maybe master these 3 games.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say on it.
That was actually a question I was going to ask, is if you guys felt that the Mass Effect game ran its course, and I understand what EA and BioWare were trying to do, where they're trying to build this universe and then continue adding to it. But do you feel that because the original trilogy concluded, should they just go ahead and leave the series as is and not try to add anything else to it? Or do you think they should try to go back and revisit that universe like they tried to do with Andromeda?
I think it would depend on who they got to do it, because the whole production history on Andromeda is so crazy. I know it was bouncing around different studios for a while. I think if you could somehow get all the people and all the voice actors and everyone from the original game, or not even the same voice actors, but just the same writers, maybe they could continue it. But at the same time, I kind of feel I'm happy with what they have. Sort of like Star Wars. I like that original trilogy, and I would have been cool if that was all I ever got.
Yeah. And you would have had a better ending, too.
Yeah. Even with as bad as the ending of this series is, I'd still
be more satisfied than having to play through Mass Effect Andromeda.
Yeah, basically. And I don't know. I think if they ever bring it back or remake it or something, it just won't feel the same to me.
I think part of the issue is that they got caught up in the grandness of the original trilogy, and I think what they should have done is maybe do what some of these other Star Wars, the popular Star Wars side stories have done, like with the Mandalorian or the Clone Wars, where they do these smaller story parts within the larger universe. Because you can't do another Mass Effect trilogy that's going to be grander than the original trilogy, because it was already encompassing the entire universe. It was already encompassing the entire galaxy. And I mean, you could try to expand to other galaxies, but ultimately they tried to do that with Andromeda, and it failed. Now, it failed for several reasons that have nothing to do with, we just did a new Mass Effect in a different galaxy. But I think part of the issue is that, like with Star Wars, that original trilogy is so beloved that when you try to do something new within that universe, there's a lot of people don't buy in because it's missing those characters, like Frank mentioned, that were from the original trilogy. I personally don't have a problem with that, but a lot of people have a problem with, this is the universe they're in, so I expect to see the same people continuing to either more the same or to grow as characters. And you can't, I don't think you can do that with a new Mass Effect game. I don't think you can do Mass Effect for a proper sequel and bring in all the original characters without completely dividing the fan base behind it. You would have to either, like Geno said, just stop producing new Mass Effect games, or produce something that is within the universe that has no connection, that maybe takes place, thousands of years later or something,
Yeah. I'd add that, it's like Spider-Boy. Nobody wants to see that shit. I mean, you have do I want Metal Gear Solid 6 with Snake's son? No, I could give a shit. I mean, no. Oh, stop. I mean, I think one of the beautiful things, series end. Just let it end. Enjoy what you have. I'd hate to see, in 30 years, if we have The Last of Us 20. No. Full games, that's it. Nobody wants to do that because it's there's money to be made, but anyway.
So my argument to that is that, look, if you have something good,
you don't want to play Metal Gear Solid. You don't want to play Snake Stun. That's your argument. No,
Geno, you have to listen to this, because you say things like that, but then there have been times where we've seen them release things that we thought we didn't want. Okay, so going into movies, right? The Mad Max trilogy ended decades ago, and yet they brought in Fury Road, and it was very successful. Personally, I mean, it's probably my second, if not my favorite, Mad Max film of the 4 movies that exist. And it was a movie that was, it was a movie that probably didn't need to come out because that series had been dead for so long, and yet they found a successful way to bring it. Now, I don't know if you agree with that the movie was good. I don't know if you enjoyed it. You can make the same argument.
I didn't.
You can make the same argument for Batman. Like, you and I know, we talk about all the time about how much we enjoyed those Tim Burton Batmans. And when that Christopher Nolan trilogy came out, there was worries about, is Christian Bale going to be a good actor, or is Christopher Nolan? No, don't, because when we had these conversations, you were concerned about whether that Batman Begins movie was going to be any good, and yet we came out very satisfied with it. So I don't think saying don't take the risk, but you have to mitigate the risk by making sure that you have something viable. And I think with Andromeda, that's where they failed. It was really just, hey, we have this name and it's popular. Let's make a game as quickly as possible, and that's what ended up ruining that game.
And I will agree with you. I am totally full of shit all the time. But thing is that, okay, look, I think this is kind of this very as consumers so entitled, especially with video games. And I think I would kind of just like, you get what you get. I would kind of like to move back to that mentality. It's like, look, we're going to make this game. We don't know if there's going to be more than 1 or 2, but whatever we make is what you're going to get. And now, these publishers are moved by this outcry of they want more. I would just like to see people just let something run its course, and that's it. And I think with Mass Effect, particularly, what's there is strong enough to just kind of be a legacy on its own and moving on.
That is true.
And I'll also say that maybe will just change my mind tomorrow.
I think we agree on the standpoint that as it stands, Mass Effect is fine, and if they leave it alone, we'll be okay. I think in regards to publishers producing more of the same or more of that content has less to do with, let's listen to the fans, and more to do with, look, the fans find it popular, let's try to get as much money off of them as we can. That, I think, is what ultimately causes those decisions. And I'm just saying, let's not disregard possibility of something being good. I mean, Ghostbusters, the all-female cast, everyone hated on that one initially just because it was an all-female cast. And it turns out it was a mediocre movie. It wasn't great, but it wasn't horrible. Depending on, it all depends. I mean, you may not like it at all. I don't know if you ever watched it. But the point is, it's just one of those things where I don't think we should dissuade people from trying to make sequels or make continuations of things that they loved. I mean, we may see in 20 years someone who grew up playing Mass Effect wanting to revisit that universe and try to bring it back, which I think is totally fine. But what I guess my argument is, they need to make sure they're doing it in a way that makes sense. Like you said, Snake's son coming in and doing something. Well, that doesn't make sense, because at what point does Snake have a son? That doesn't fit into the storyline. They would have to create something in order to make sense of that. But then you have something that, like, you mentioned Spider-Boy earlier, and the thing that popped in my mind was the very popular, not the now popular Gwen series, where the concept of Gwen Stacy being Spider-Man didn't make any sense, but because the writing was so well done and the art was so well done, it became a very popular series, and it's continuing to go. And I mean, it's just one of those things where I think you should be willing to take a chance, but you have to make sure to mitigate that risk with things that will make it work. And that requires people putting in effort. And obviously with Andromeda, that was not the case.
Sure.
I definitely want to chime in on this. And I actually really agree with Geno, because that original trilogy, it was just so well done, and then they just totally Game of Thrones that ending, if not worse. But
pretty much.
That self-contained story on its own stands so well, and and Bobby's got a point. If they were to try to bring it back and they were to continue it with something, they would have to be very careful. The problem is, look at Metal Gear, and we've got Metal Gear Survives. Obviously, the publishers, developers, they just want to make money. So I'm okay with them just stopping with it. If I were to say anything, all I really want is a remaster on whether it's PS4 or PS5, just even just remaster on PC, I'd be okay with that. If I were to, if I had to say they're gonna continue this, I would not want EA to handle this. I'd want somebody like CD Projekt Red,
Sure.
because their storytelling is amazing, and you can tell that they take their time with games and they actually do their games justice. Look at the Witcher series. I'm really excited for Cyberpunk.
Hey.
That they're doing things right, and I think if you were to give Mass Effect to somebody like them, we could probably still at least get a good story based on what's already been established.
That's true. That's true. I mean, both of you are correct. You're correct. We shouldn't just dismiss it outright. Yeah, that's cool.
See, and the only reason that I really would want more of that is because they did such a great job with that world building. I would love to see side stories, especially if it was just more of the same characters but of their histories. Seeing Garrus during his time in CSEC, and like when he was pursuing Saren, or Anderson, like during the novel time when he's working with, or like even Thane when he's an assassin. Then you could have Mass Effect, Assassin's Creed, Thane, Krios. And then Assassin's Creed would actually be good.
Got him! Got him!
Again, good again.
We're not gonna jump on Assassin's Creed, but
so we've kind of touched on this a little bit. So let's bring up this last question. I worded it: should EA remake Mass Effect? But really, the question is: should EA redo Mass Effect in any format? And you guys had already mentioned like an HD release. So what are your opinions on that?
If they re-release it, that'd be cool. Like, just keep it the same, but on a new platform, I'd be okay with that.
And all DLC included.
Yes.
Because it was hard to... Me and Frank spent some time recently trying to get all the DLC for all these games on the PC version by going into the EA archives and doing this dance with getting all that restored. So it'd be nice to have it all in a complete package again.
When did the first game come out? Was it 2006?
2007.
7.
Okay. So they already missed the 10-year anniversary.
Yeah.
So maybe
Andromeda was the 10-year anniversary, I think.
Yeah,
Right.
actually it was.
So maybe 2027. We'll see a 20-year anniversary release.
Or 15. They can do 15, just denominations of 5. In all honesty, I'm totally okay with like an HD remaster if they fix the ending. I mean, even if they don't, I'd still buy it.
Right.
But like what I would want is I'd want them to include all the DLC, and I'd want them to redo the ending. At the very least, if they even just do stills, like they could just have like 100, stills and have just a voiceover for each one of those and just kind of glue them together based on your decisions. It's like, okay, well, you saved this race, but you killed this race, and just put those together. That way, at least I feel like my choices matter.
There was a fan-made ending to it that I patched into Mass Effect 3 one time that sort of did that. But I mean, it was just one ending no matter what you did still. But it was a more satisfying ending than what we got.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to check that out.
But like Geno said, though, that journey is amazing, which is why, even as awful, like, I wasn't a Game of Thrones fan, and I know a lot of people were like, I don't even want to rewatch the series. I'm like, as much as I dislike the ending, I can totally go back and replay these games all the time.
Yeah.
Geno?
And Game of Thrones is an interesting thing. Sorry. I was just going to say, and it's interesting because, like, yeah, I was dissatisfied with Game of Thrones, but it brought back a lot of the Mass Effect stuff for me when I saw that ending. So I was like, this feels familiar. But sorry, go ahead, Geno.
I'm with you guys. Just remaster it for a current gen system. That would be all I would want.
So I'm of a somewhat different mind where I guess I use the term remake because I had a certain concept in mind. So I'm gonna preempt this with a story when I was growing up. You guys remember? Oh crap! So where the major players used to be on George D. Was it George? Yeah, George Dieter.
Yeah, I remember that one.
It used to be a movie place before it became a major players, and I can't remember what the movie place was called off the top of my head.
Meringues.
What was it?
Meringues.
No, that's not what it was called. It was like called Video One or something like that.
You mean,
like
not the theater?
No, not the theater. That's you said Boomerangs. No, that's Lee Trevino. I said George Dieter.
Oh. Okay.
Anyway, so the store that was there, it was like an independent rental place.
Was it Major Video?
Major Video. There you go.
It was Major Video. Yeah, I used to go there.
And my dad knew the manager, so he'd always let us know what new stuff was coming out. But I've never been able to find it, so maybe I imagined it as a child. But I remember my dad renting a version of the Godfather trilogy, and it was on VHS.
Oh, where it was edited together, right?
Right. It was recut chronologically, right? So you had all the Vito Corleone when he was young in Italy and then coming to America and all that kind of stuff first. And then you had the family stuff that came later from the first movie and parts of the second movie. The third movie, which you really ignored that last tape because it's the third movie. And
and wait, hold on. And there was a Shakey's right next to it, right?
I don't remember that. You may be right, but I honestly don't remember Shakey's. But anyway, so when I think of them re-releasing Mass Effect, I would like for them to do it in a way where all three games are streamlined into one larger game. So like as you conclude the first game, it just continues to lead into the second game instead of this idea of having three distinct separate games where this one ends, there's a conclusion, and then you have to start up the second game and start things up. Instead, they would just kind of blend together as one larger game. Maybe even to the standpoint of changing up the gameplay so that all three games are more in line with maybe what they feel is the best balance of the gameplay throughout the series, which might be three. Kind of like what Retro Studios did with the Metroid Prime trilogy. Even though those are three distinct games, they brought the game controls from Metroid Prime 3 into Metroid Prime 1 and 2, and they did some balancing and some tweaking in order to make that gameplay work with those first two games. I think it'd be really interesting if they did a Mass Effect trilogy that way. So instead of having... I still feel like there are three distinct experiences that culminate in one story. And I'd like for them to take that concept and make it into one distinct experience for that one story. But that might take too much investment.
I think if anything, it's just because of how large those games are. I think that's probably what would make it really difficult. But you know what? If they were to take the concept of making it like open world, and then at a certain point, once you complete story things, then like the map changes to the second and third games. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like the first one, the way that was more open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And so you just go around and do whatever. And maybe they could play around with just maybe changing some of the side stories, some of the side characters. You could experience them earlier or later, but the main story itself is still solid. You know.
No, and so when I asked the question, that's what I had in mind when I was asking that question. Otherwise, if they can't do something like that, I don't think they should necessarily remake the game like they've been doing with some recent games, and instead just release some kind of upgrade, like a 4K upgrade. That way we can get some nice looking games. Well,
I mean, playing it on PC, going back to it, it still looks pretty good. I mean, it's still, I would say it looks definitely last gen, tail end of PS3 life cycle, early PS4 for 2 and 3, and then 1 definitely is 7th generation, but it's still really nice. Really nice.
Well, and is there a version of Mass Effect on PS4 or Xbox One?
No, that's why that's my gripe.
Well, you can play the original games on Xbox One. If you have them, the discs will work with the backwards compatibility.
Right.
But that's about as far as they go with current gen consoles.
But there's no specific ports.
No.
Yeah. Okay. So, you guys like to add anything else before we close out for tonight?
I'm going to play this trilogy again very, very soon. And I'm going to still hate the ending. But you know what? I'm really excited because now I have all the DLC. Because this is the first time that I'm actually going to play 1, 2, and 3. I'll have both DLCs for 1, which is Bring Down the Sky and Pinnacle Station. I'd only ever played Bring Down the Sky before. I played all the DLC for 2 before. But 3, I will be playing Leviathan, Omega, and Citadel for the first time. So I'm really excited for this next playthrough.
Cool. Yeah, I have not played any of the DLC on these games.
Yeah, DLC for 2 is really good. You should play a lot of that, especially like the Shadow Broker stuff.
And Project Overlord.
Yeah.
Geno, any last words?
Eh.
Those are good words.
Those are almost words.
Oh, actually, I do. As far as Mass Effect collections go, like who owns what?
Well, I own the games on everything, even PC. I've got a Commander Shepard figure, and I've got the Mass Effect art books. I mentioned earlier the comic collection that I didn't even remember that I had. So now I can read all the comics right now, which it's probably a good time with this quarantine thing going on. I'll have plenty of time to do that. I have all the strategy guides for all the games.
Except for Andromeda.
Yeah, I'm not. That's not included in this discussion.
We're talking about the trilogy.
Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much what I have. I know Frank has a way bigger collection than I do, which I'm really jealous about.
Who's next?
Geno. I think actually Geno has the biggest.
It's decent. I don't remember it because I haven't seen any of it in years. But if you remember that first limited edition, that's what I'll remember.
Mm-hmm. You know what? So I've got all the collector's editions. I think for everything, I have. Well, the collector's edition was only on 360, and then I have physical copies for 2 and 3. The collector editions for all 3, actually. PC, 360, and PS3. I have a Garrus figure because he's the best companion. He's the best character ever. And I do have the strategy guides. I have both the regular 2 and collectors of 2, and only the collectors of 3. And I do have Mass Effect Trilogy on PC and PS3.
It's not bad. Yeah.
But you know what? And I'm missing the trilogy vinyl. That's one thing I really want.
So I had the trilogy vinyl and I had to sell it.
You only had the one copy?
That sucked. Yeah.
Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. I'll buy it one day when I have disposable income.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for coming in tonight and sharing your love of Mass Effect with us. I really appreciate you guys coming out.
Thank you.
This is definitely a very focused podcast. I think this is a game series that definitely, in a way, defines the kind of things we love in gaming as a whole. Particularly with the group that we're with. There's a lot of us in the group who have played through the series and enjoyed what it brought to the table, and continue to hope that more games mimic the best parts of this game series. So I'm glad we were able to take the time to think about it, because it wasn't even on my list of things for us to discuss until Frank brought it up last week, and I was like, well, heck, let's get it now while we're talking about it, because you guys had actually talked about playing through Mass Effect before we even came up with the concept of doing this podcast, so it kind of makes sense that we're doing it now, kind of in line with what you guys are choosing to do. But with that being said, thank you guys. For our next episode, I don't know what we're going to talk about, because we got a list of like 30 things now to do podcasts on. So we'll discuss that later on. And that's it for tonight. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you guys next time. It's difficult to pinpoint what makes something great, probably because it's usually not just one thing. There might be a defining moment that stays with you, but the moment stays because of all the smaller moments that pulled you in, that made you invest yourself into the universe being created. This is also why there will always be an endless debate as to what makes Mass Effect great, and that's what makes these conversations so enjoyable. If you haven't played Mass Effect, do yourself a favor and go play it now. If you're planning on waiting for the rumored HD remaster, don't. The game is great now. It still holds up despite some of its more quirky game design choices. Trust me. That's it for this week's podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back with a more philosophical episode because next time we are talking BioShock. Peace!